don't even know if I remember how to do this. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the podcast. Again, I feel like I start every episode off like this. It's been so long since I've done an episode. I'm trying so hard to push through on the YouTube channel and all the work that's involved there and this podcast in order to get to a point where I can have help with it. But help that will stick around because I'll be paying for that help. So this has been the hardest push on the podcast since I moved to Tennessee, because for the longest time, the first year of the podcast, which was 2020, and well into the second year of 2021, I was still living in New Hampshire, and Corey, my good friend Corey Marshall, who does a ton of traveling with me, we're best friends, rode BMX and did lots of car stuff together, only lived about an hour away from me, and we hung out every week. So it was super easy to have him as a co-host on, and it was easy to keep weekly episodes coming out because we were having long form conversations anyway, and it was real easy to just sit down and press record and record those conversations. And I feel like they're conversations that are easier to listen to because there's back and forth talk, there's banter, there's laughter sometimes. You know, it's more fun to have a conversation with someone, but it's also more fun to listen to someone having a conversation with someone else and not just sit alone in a studio like I'm doing right now, talking to a camera, pretending like you're all here with me. So it's been really difficult since I moved to Tennessee. I've had a few friends on. Mason Gavin lives here in Chattanooga, and our schedules are super, super crazy and different. And he's been on a few times since I've moved here, but a long ways away from actually being like a co-host. So I feel like the last 4 or 5 episodes have started off with, well, sorry for the long delay or the long hiatus, but here we are. So this one was important though, because I didn't write the podcast off. It just takes so much work to sit down and just talk alone in the studio and try to make it fluent enough or fluid enough to where it's easy to listen to or enjoyable to listen to. But although I've been discouraged about the podcast lately because of all that work involved in motivation, solely motivation, I came home from this European tour, like an actual Euro tour, revitalized on this with a whole new sense of motivation and quite actually inspiration, feeling really inspired by you guys. And I want to talk about the Euro trip. That's what this episode's mostly about, because I came home with so much to talk about, so many experiences while over there. But wanted to start off by just saying thank you to all of you guys. It was astounding to me to be in Germany, to be in Poland, to be in the Netherlands, all these places where I held some pop-up meets, some Ludwig's Garage, Governor's Club pop-up meets, and have you guys approach me and in your second language of English, tell me that you really enjoy listening to the podcast. That is honestly the most insane thing I could have heard. I mean, the fact that you guys live so far away and enjoy listening to this podcast means so much to me. So here we are. Don't really want to say out of my comfort zone, but it's not easy to sit here and just kind of like talk when you don't have a co-host or a guest or someone to talk to. So I just wanted to say thank you guys so much for all the inspiration and lighting the flame to keep going and staying motivated on this stuff. So the Euro Tour 2023, I mean, what an insane trip. We're going to get right into that very soon. I got a few announcements to make first. And I should have done a better job at writing some notes down, but this was a small segment of the afternoon where I could get in here and just press record, turn the lights on, and go. So, announcements. July 15th. Super excited about this. I'm going to be in St. John, New Brunswick, Canada for the Complex Union Show roll call. The guys have invited me to be up there to be an honorary judge, as they say. Still surprised that suddenly I'm getting all these offers to be judges or a judge at car shows when I sell myself pretty short on that. I feel like I'm not basically qualified to be a judge at some of these insane shows. And we'll talk about being a judge at All Trace in Poland too, because that was all the pressure. But the Complex Union guys, I've been friends with them for quite a while on the internet. I've made them a lot of merchandise. I've made a lot of leather key rings for them, for both Complex Union and Alpine Motors, an automotive shop that's up there as well. And when I put out an Instagram post earlier this spring, I had a bunch of vacancies on my calendar, and I knew that there were things going on that I couldn't remember. So I kind of put a post out on Instagram asking all of you guys what you were going to for shows, what types of events you were attending. I kind of wanted to use that as the mood board to figure out what my plan was going to be this year. Because so often there'll be something that pops up the next weekend, and I'm like, oh shoot, that was next weekend, and frantically make plans to make it happen. So when I put that post out, Colin at Complex Union emailed me and basically said, hey, we're putting on our event on July 15th. This was probably in like February or March. Inviting me up, said, we'd love to have you up and be a judge, but at the very least, come up and enjoy the show and see what you think. And I've never been to St. John, New Brunswick before. And being from New Hampshire, I'm bordering Canada for the most part. And I'd been to Montreal, Toronto. I've been to Canada a handful of times, but never that far east. I'd never been to St. John before. So I was super excited. We marked it on the calendar, and it's the next big trip that's coming up next, basically the next, I think, plane trip, unless some crazy stuff happens in the next couple of weeks, which is totally not outside the realm of possibility. But I'm super excited. If you are planning on going or you can make the trip, please come out to this. It looks awesome. I think this is their third year. I don't want to get that wrong. I think, here, I'm checking right now for those of you who are not watching. It does not say what year this is. I think it's year 3. It hasn't been going on that long. Yeah, doesn't say on their post. They're doing a great job promoting for this show. It's an indoor-outdoor show. No expense spared, it looks like. It looks like it's going to be a great time. Saturday, July 15th. So if you can make it out, would love to see you guys there. Can't wait to come hang out with all of you. And I'm super excited to see what comes out for cars as well, especially in that like nook of Canada. After that, there might be a few things on, but in early August, I'm making another trip to Canada. And I think when this comes out, they haven't made a formal announcement yet, but I'm going to go ahead and announce it because it's promotion anyway. I'm going to be flying up to Montreal for Eurokracy this year. Now, Rick, Sergio, and Jesse are friends of mine. I've known those guys for a long time. They are the 3 main core guys of Eurokracy. And I attended in 2018 with my E23 BMW. And it was a great time because I always saw Eurokracy as almost like the Canadian Waterfest in a way. And I think I only correlate that to the amount of incredible Volkswagens that showed up to that show, but also because it's in the middle of the summer on pavement. So it was always warm. It was always pretty hot. So I kind of attributed it to the way Waterfest in New Jersey felt when you went there. But it's been a few years. I've only been that one time. It was 2018. So the guys have twisted my arm enough to come up and be a judge at that show as well. And I promise, guys, I'm not opening up my books to be a guest judge at these shows because it's a lot of work. For me, it's not about the awards. It's not about the trophies. Even though with my laser business, I make awards, I make trophies. I've been making some of my own that I've been bringing to a few shows, and we'll get into that too when we talk about the Euro Tour. But it's not about the awards for me. I don't like judging cars. So I've kind of gotten into this weird phase this summer of being like a guest judge at these shows, but it's kind of to help be involved with an invite. You know, these guys have invited me up, and I'm honored to be a part of the show in this way. So I'm going to do my best. And yeah, I'm going to be a judge at 2 Canadian shows this summer. Eastern Canadian shows, which is hilarious. But Eurokracy is, let me pull this up. I had these written down for notes. Eurokracy, Montreal, August 12th and 13th. It's a 2-day show, Saturday and Sunday. Will be attending. Have yet to book flights and whatnot, but that is locked in as of right now. So Complex Union, July 15th, roll call in St. John, New Brunswick, and Eurokracy in Montreal, August 12th and 13th. Now, Might be blowing a little bit of smoke here, but if I speak it, it might be spoken into existence. The weekend after Eurokracy in Montreal, the weekend of August 19th, is the Creme de la Creme show in Finland. And it's not quite in Helsinki. I think it's a few hours out of Helsinki. But Auntie and the boys have been friends of mine for a while, and we got a chance to finally meet in person at Eurokracy in Poland on this last trip. And we had a chance to hang out quite a bit, which was awesome because at a show that huge, it's very not so frequent that you run into people that you know because, well, if you're looking for someone, let's put it this way. If you're looking for someone, you won't run into them. You'll have to coordinate via phone in order to run into them because there's so many people at such a large event. And we just kept running into each other and had a chance to hang out quite a bit over the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at Ultrace. And I knew they had an event coming up. We talked about it a lot. Really got on with those guys real well. Really enjoy those guys and have never been to Finland. So I'd really like to get to Finland for their show. Fitted Fest, and that's August 19th. It's going to be a marathon to do Eurokracy in Montreal. I think we'll be flying home the Monday, the 14th, and would love to make a week out of going to Finland. And so right now the tentative plan is to fly home on the Monday, the 14th, and then maybe the Wednesday, the 16th, fly to Finland for maybe a week. Now, I've already looked at the possibilities of flying from Montreal to Helsinki and doing 3 one-ways. Chattanooga to Montreal, Montreal, Helsinki, Helsinki back to Chattanooga. And it's quite expensive, the Montreal to Helsinki. So it was looking like it's going to be cheaper to do 2 individual round trips, but much harder on the psyche and the body. But I kind of wanted to speak that one out to both promote the Fitted Fest show on August 19th in Finland, but to also kind of almost solidify that I'm really trying to get to that show. And it should be known that I'm self-employed and this is all very expensive. Now some of these guys that have invited me up to these shows are helping out in great ways that help make this all possible. But being self-employed, I'm left to my own devices to pay my bills. And I do not have employees. Nothing turns while I'm gone. So when I shut the lights off and I leave, I make no money. So although I travel a lot, it's because I do suffer from wanderlust. I love traveling so much. I love seeing people, I love seeing new places, and I just love being on the go. But this is quite stressful. So if you're listening to this and all you want to do is travel and you're wondering like how some people can do this, I don't know how other people do it, but I am constantly stressed out and constantly trying to line up work when I come home, even if it's going to be for a few days. Between Eurokracy and Fitted Fest in Finland, I will probably be trying to get a couple jobs in and out the door to pay for being away for so long. So this is quite a grind. It's quite a hustle. It's super rewarding. But it is a drowning feeling sometimes. But that is it for news. I do want to plug the idea of doing some Euro Tour 2023 merch. I did make the leather key rings that I brought with me to Europe, but I think I want to do a shirt. And after I talk a little bit more about the trip, I'll talk a little bit more about my ideas for a Euro Tour 2023 shirt. It would have been great to get these shirts done before the trip, but the trip turned into being something that I didn't plan on. So this might work perfectly to do merch after the whole journey and adventure. So 3 weeks, almost to the day. It was to the day, actually. From the day we flew out to the day we flew home, it was 3 weeks, June 1st to June 21st. And we started our trip in Germany. And, man, I don't even know where to begin. Well, we begin at the beginning. I suppose it's a great place to start. We flew to Frankfurt, Germany, and my good friend Alex from Gera, Germany, which is probably 3 hours away from Frankfurt. Where Gera is located, your main airports are all basically 2 to 3 hours away. You've got Dresden, Berlin, Frankfurt, Leipzig. Leipzig's only like an hour and a half, I think, but not as big of an airport. And Prague. Prague's about 3 hours away south in the Czech Republic. So we flew into Frankfurt, and Alex drove out and picked us up real early. It was like 7 a.m. And we drove 3 hours northwest up towards Cologne to Dortmund. And we went to see Jean-Pierre Kremer at JP Performance. And a lot of you guys have probably heard of him. Massive YouTuber, car automotive influencer, I guess. Mega following online, but big YouTuber. Started a performance shop, has a museum now, which is filled with a lot of his own cars, and has a restaurant called Big Boost Burger. And I hadn't met Jean-Pierre before. And oddly enough, he was there when we went up there. And he's quite a celebrity in Germany. So, there's lines of people lining up to meet him. But Alex knows Jean-Pierre, and it was a surprise to go there because when we arrived, it wasn't until we basically got on the plane that Alex said, hey, we're going to go visit JP Performance. So we went up to Dortmund and got a chance to see that facility. What an insane facility. So I got a huge thanks to Manu, which is basically Jean-Pierre's manager. He kind of manages everything there. And he took us around and showed us to all the different spots, the actual garage, the restaurant. They gave us lunch on them, which was huge. So huge thanks to Manu and the team there. They let us try a whole bunch of different foods that they made there. And the burgers held up. Coming from America, the burgers at Big Boost Burger in Germany they were amazing. So we had lunch, and then we went to Jean-Pierre's personal private shop. Kind of saw behind the curtain some of the projects they're working on there, which are going to be insane. His channel's in German, so it's quite hard for me to watch, but they're backlogged on some of their episodes. So some of the stuff I saw in the shop haven't even made it to the YouTube channel yet. So that's pretty cool. And then we went to the museum and got a chance to meet Jean-Pierre there and hung out with him for a little bit. And again, he gave us more food because they have a coffee shop attached to the museum, and they served us a bunch of pastries and coffee. And so that was huge. So huge thanks to Jean-Pierre and Manu for that, and Alex for facilitating it and driving us up there. And then from Dortmund, it was another 3.5 or 4 hours back to Gera. So we did a very long day. We did a red-eye flight. Basically, we're up all day on the Thursday traveling. We drove 2 hours. We drove 20 minutes from here to a shuttle service, and then 2 to 2.5 hour shuttle drive from there to Nashville to JFK, 3 hour layover at JFK to Frankfurt, 3 hours to Dortmund, hung out all day at JP Performance, 4 hours to Gera, and then finally slept. So it was a long day. And then the jet lag hit real hard. Saturday was just hanging out. We went to Alex's shop. He is a rotiform and other wheel company distributor in Germany. So we got a chance to see his little shop, kind of a one-man operation. So it was really cool to see what he does on the day-to-day. He's got a tire machine, a balancer, basically mounts and balances wheels and tire combos, or will even mount them on people's cars. He's got a lift in his shop. And Sunday, we went and saw my good friend Robert from Edelweiss Customs, Edelweiss on Instagram. And we did a Ludwig's Garage pop-up meet at his place. And he's in Schleiz, Germany, right next to a vintage racetrack, which is really, really cool. So people from all over the place came out for the meet. I mean, insane. My friends Marcel and Eugene from Cologne and a few other guys from Cologne all drove out about 6.5 hours to come hang out for 3 hours and then 6.5 hours back. And that was just one example of guys driving an incredible distance to come hang out. We had probably well over 100 people at the event. I brought some hoodies, windbreakers, a few t-shirts I had left, some hats, and the Euro Tour 2023 leather keyrings I made. I overmade them for sure. I made 150. I think I brought a solid 50 or more home with me. But I made a bunch of these keyrings to sell at all these pop-up meets we were going to do to help offset the cost of the whole trip. But Marcel and the Cologne boys drove about 6 hours. Ska, a gentleman I met there, who I only knew on Instagram before that, drove his 1960-something Volkswagen Beetle 5 hours to Robert's shop on Saturday, thinking that's when the meet was. And there was no one there. And he drove 5 hours all the way home. And then the next morning, drove 5 hours back out in his notchback with his wife, a 71 or 72 notchback, and then 5 hours back again. And well, I mean, what an MVP for coming to hang out. Gave him a bunch of merchandise for his efforts. So it was really cool to see so many people drive from so far away in a country that doesn't speak English and get to see old friends too. Some old friends. I did Wörthersee in 2018, so I spent a few weeks in Germany 5 years ago as well. So it was great to see a bunch of those guys and meet some new friends as well. So Sunday was great. Sunday, that pop-up meet was amazing. But the most important part of that meet was Remco showing up. Now, if you guys follow along on the YouTube channel or on Instagram, you'll know that Remco lives just south of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And he had just flown here for about a week and helped me start the Porsche 924S project. So he was here while we got the air suspension we got the Subaru front bags figured out, we got the rear bags figured out. So he was here for the beginning of that installation process. And while he was here, the Euro trip was partially booked and kind of happening. And it was going to be centered around going to Ultrace in Poland and then ending at Players Classic at Goodwood Motor Circuit in England. And Remco's kind of in between the two. He's closer to England than he is Poland. But he was making the awards for Players this year and was planning on driving his Opel Kadett from the Netherlands over to England for the show. And so we kind of started brainstorming, like, boy, it'd be pretty cool to buy another Opel Kadett while there, like after Ultrace, and build it in the Netherlands at his shop and then drive 2 Opel Kadetts to England for Players Classic. So when he went home, he had a few that he had found on Facebook Marketplace and wanted to go look at them. And we were kind of toying with this idea. But every car he was interested in was sold before we could go look at them. So with the trip quickly approaching and so much more on my plate, I kind of wrote that idea off. Remco hadn't really found anything promising or any leads on any more Opel Kadetts that were worth buying, but notably in my price range. And I kind of thought about selling the Porsche before the trip, or was hoping I could sell the Porsche before the trip to help fund some adventures like this on that trip. But I didn't because of the clutch issue, which if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, you've seen all that craziness. Because I lost the clutch in Helen, Georgia, which was literally a few days before we left for the Europe trip. So I told Remco, I'm out. I'm not going to buy an Opel, even if it's only a couple $1,000s. This trip's going to be as expensive as it is or already. So I'm out. So we fast forward to being at Edelweiss. The plan was to fly from Berlin to London after Ultrace for Players Classic in England. So that was the ultimate plan. And inter-Europe flights are so cheap, we hadn't booked it yet. I think the last I had looked before we flew to Germany, a flight from Berlin to London was like $60. It was super cheap. So we were keeping that super loose, shooting from the hip. We were just going to book it while we were in Germany. But Alex kept asking me if I'd booked that flight, like leading up to the trip. And then even after once we arrived, he's like, have you booked your flight after Ultrace to England yet? I was like, no, not yet. He's like, well, yeah, you should wait a little bit longer. And I kept thinking, why should I wait? And I never really asked him why, but I kind of thought maybe him and Robert at Edelweiss had like a cool idea to like drive a car themselves to England and thought maybe it'd be cool to incorporate my trip in that, or I didn't know. So at the pop-up meet midday with easily 100 people there, Remco comes driving in a bone stock Opel Kadett, and Alex is riding shotgun. And when I see them pulling in, I knew immediately that Kayla and I were now driving this Opel ultimately to England. Like I just knew it. I didn't know. It was a surprise. It wasn't planned. I was not expecting it at all. And as of that moment, hadn't booked any flights to England. And the second I saw that car, the next 2 weeks flashed before my eyes. And I was like, oh boy, I know what's happening now. So Remco from the Netherlands had found this Opel Kadett a couple hours away from Gera, where Alex lives. And it was about 7 hours from where Remco lives. So Remco got in touch with Alex and kind of proposed this whole crazy surprise idea. And what he did was Remco drove his van from the Netherlands to Alex's shop, which is right where Alex's house is for the most part. And the morning of the meet, let me back up. I'm getting ahead of myself. The day before the meet on the Saturday, Remco drove all the way to Alex's area where we were staying and went and looked at this Opel Kadett and purchased it and left it with the guy that was selling it, and then stayed at a hotel that night. And in the morning, went to Alex's shop to borrow his trailer. At which point I was planning on going to Alex's shop with him to get his E24 that we were taking to the meet that morning. And the Saturday night, Alex said, well, you know what? I'm just going to go real early. Why don't you sleep in? You know, you've only been here for a day, so just relax, and I'll bring the 6 Series back to the house, and we'll all just cruise from there. So I thought, yeah, no problem. Didn't think anything of it. Didn't think it was suspicious. Because what ended up happening was when Alex got to his shop, Remco was actually leaving with his trailer to go get the Opel. And Remco's van has his business name right down the side of it. It's a bagged transit van on rotiforms. Like, you would have noticed it. So he dodged that bullet. Like, I wasn't there to see Remco's van. So Remco went and picked the Opel Kadett up, which was another 2 hours away. Then drove 2 hours back to Roberts, unloaded the car. Alex jumped in, and then they pulled in with the thing. So when he got out, I was like, man, this is so crazy, because he's at this point 6.5 hours from home. And, you know, Remco even said, you know, because Kayla's with me, my girlfriend, and Remco's like, well, it's up to you, man. You know, I thought this would be a really cool surprise. You don't have to drive this all the way to my place in Amsterdam or in the Netherlands and then on to England if you don't want to. And I said, no. You've gone this far. I'm going to take it the rest of the way. There ain't no way I'm going to let you put all of this effort and money and time and logistics into this for me to just be like, nah, trailer it back to the Netherlands. I'm good. So that aggressively changed the plans of the trip. And it was a complete surprise. I know I had a lot of people being like, you guys must have planned that. It's like, nope, we spitballed an idea like that a month prior. And then I'd given up on it and even told Remco, we're not doing it. Like, I don't have the money to do it. So Remco, in his own mind, was like, all right, well, I'll buy the car and make you do it anyway. So after that, the following week, we now had the Opel. What Remco did was Remco trailered it back to Alex's. He left the meet, trailered the car back to Alex's, and left the car right on Alex's trailer, and then drove home to the Netherlands. And then when we got back later in the day, the next day, we unloaded the car and just we're going to wait till later in the week to put it on a lift and do like a quick service and prep it for the drive to the Netherlands after Ultrace. So that following week, we did a lot. We did a whole lot. And one of the main things we did was we visited Holy Hall. Now, some of you guys may know who these guys are, and they are in the middle of nowhere in the German countryside. I mean, a town that barely has cell service and certainly doesn't have even a gas station. Like, it's a small little ancient village in the middle of nowhere in the countryside of Germany. And they are doing some insane automotive stuff. Probably the car that you've most seen lately on Instagram is a Group 5 Ford Capri that they're scratch building by hand. They've wide-bodied it themselves. They've built a full chassis themselves. It's E90 drivetrain with an LS power plant. It's insane. And it hadn't run yet. It was still in the build phase. And we went to visit them and see it move under its own power for the first time. And it was just incredible to meet those guys. Johannes, Kevin, Pascal, and Fabian. Getting a chance to meet those guys was awesome. None of them speak English. Kevin speaks the most English out of all of them, and he was easier to communicate. Alex kind of played translator there for a little bit, but they've got a YouTube channel. It's Holy Hall. Instagram is holyhall.de. Huge thanks to those guys for opening their doors and like letting us just hang out for an entire day there at the shop and served us food. They cooked roster, which in West Germany is basically bratwurst. In East Germany, they call it roster. But had a huge cookout, filled us with food, went for a ride in Kevin's Trabant, which is amazing. Everyone was laughing hysterically because I was just as, if not more jazzed up about Kevin's Trabant than I was about the Group 5 Capri that they're scratch building. But Kevin's Trabant's pretty cool. He's like fully restored it. He's done a ton of suspension fabrication to it. He's body dropped it. It's on air suspension. He's custom built some split wheels for it. You guys got to go to the YouTube channel. The link to the YouTube channel is in the description below. It's here on the YouTube or it's on the Spotify or iTunes description. So that's a quick YouTube channel plug. If you guys haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please go subscribe to it. The growth has been evident lately, so I can't thank you guys enough for all of that, and especially to you guys on the Patreon as well. So seeing Kevin's Trabant was really cool. Getting a chance to cruise around in that. He hadn't driven it in like over a year. And yeah, the whole experience to see Holy Hall was really, really cool. To see that car in person and what those guys have learned. A lot of that stuff, this is their first go around on a lot of this like body work and body design, suspension geometry and design. They basically looked at photos. They like printed photos off of the internet of old Capri Group 5 cars in their build phases or their disassembly phases and just kind of took notes and built this car off of like what they had seen photos of, which is just so nuts. And they fully plan to track this car. So I'm super eager to see like how the car performs and what kind of adjustments or changes they need to make, because this is all just like first go for a lot of those guys. I mean, they're fabricators, but first go for a car of that level, especially of that level of performance too. So that was really cool. And boy, I don't even know what else we did. It was just so insane that whole following week. But leading up to Alltrace was that next weekend in Wrocław, Poland. We know it here in America as Wrocław. And that's about a 3.5-hour drive from Gera. And what we did was Alex offered to trailer the Opel Kadett to Wrocław, Poland for the Alltrace weekend. We were going to be there Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And the reason why we were going to bring the Opel Kadett with us was for two reasons. One reason was the straight shot from Wrocław, Poland to the Netherlands, where Remco is a straighter shot than if we were going to go back down south to Gera and then back up to the Netherlands. So basically, it was the same distance roundabout from Wrocław to the Netherlands as Alex's hometown to the Netherlands. But also because I was invited to be a judge at Alltrace this year, and that duty kept me late Sunday at the show. And I didn't really want to leave early anyway. We traveled all this way to go to one of the most insane shows in the entire world. And I wanted to stay the whole length of it. But Alex and his wife, Megan, had to leave early on Sunday to get to Berlin to pick their child and dog up from their parents and then go on home. So Alex offered to trailer the Opel all the way to Poland. So we didn't have to drive it all the way into Poland, heading further east, and then drop it off. They left early Sunday, and then Kayla and I were basically just left alone with the Opel in Poland to then drive about 12 hours to Remco's in the Netherlands. So you'll have to watch the YouTube channel or the YouTube episodes to see how everything went down. But the Opel basically had a dead battery after Alex left, and it's an automatic, so you can't push it to start it. And we had no tools. And luckily we have my friend Henry Full, who was there with Color Creations. I think it's Color Creations. Had a jump pack, and you let us borrow the jump pack, and everything was fine. But being a judge at Alltrace was the most insane experience of my life as far as cars are concerned. Alltrace is a show that I'd wanted to attend for years. This show has been one of the craziest shows in person, but on the internet, it's done a wild job of basically depicting the show as being as insane as it is in person. So when you look at Alltrace coverage on your phone, on Instagram or something, it's clear that it's a show you need to get to. So every year it never worked out. And then after 2020, it was unclear as to how easy it was going to be to travel to Poland or to Europe in general after that. So now that everything's open, Adrian, who puts the show on, had hit me up about inviting me to be a judge. And I was like, yes, like for sure. Absolutely. This is too insane to pass up. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we're just absolutely mad. You'll have to watch some of the coverage on both my channel or anyone else's coverage of Alltrace. Choosing top 16 out of over 1,400 cars, 1,400 insane cars for that matter, was a really difficult job. And then we narrowed it down to the best in show. And it was a great panel of judges, including Kato-san from Japan, the guy who owns Liberty Walk. They shipped over, well, I shouldn't say they, because Adrian from Alltrace did it. They brought over the Silhouette R34 Liberty Walk Skyline, which was incredible to see in person because, as I said many times in Poland at Alltrace, the R30 Silhouette Skyline was my favorite car on Gran Turismo when I was a kid on PlayStation 1. So they basically built this car as a tribute to the R30 Silhouette car. So it was really cool to see that car in person since it's from Japan, and I otherwise probably wouldn't have had a chance to see it. So judging was a great experience. The Pontiac Fiero ended up taking best in show, which I support. I voted for that car right down to the last few. The Night Ride van was definitely one of my favorites, both because it's something that I would build. It's outside the box. You guys know my style. That van is just so cool. It's a little like K van that a lot of people usually put like Hayabusa or motorcycle motors in. So instead of just putting a motorcycle motor in it, they put a whole motorcycle in it and took the rear wheel off and had like the chain drive a rear differential. So the van actually has a motorcycle in the back of it. And the motorcycle is hooked up to all your pedals and shifter linkage and cables and all that stuff. And you can actually drive the van from the motorcycle in the back powering it, which is so cool. And it's on air and it's body dropped and it's full custom chassis and custom suspension. And that was probably one of my favorite vehicles of the show. But the Pontiac Fiero one that had so much insane work. The guy's from Poland, so it was like a hometown hero, as the Night Ride guys are as well. But it was really cool to have like a local guy win the show. Lots of crazy body work and Lamborghini doors, everything he did himself, which is really cool. But one of my favorites, and this is all depicted in the YouTube channel or in the YouTube episodes, I made my own laser engraved award to technically was originally going to privately give to my favorite vehicle and their owner at Ultrace. I made one for Ultrace and one for Players Classic. And when Adrian heard word about this, he wanted me to present it during the award ceremony, which was just nuts. Because I mean, there's thousands and thousands of people at this show. So it was an honor to kind of talk about who I am and what I'm about, why I was there, and that I was presenting this award to my favorite vehicle there. And it's really cool because my other favorite vehicle there didn't make the top 16, which made it fitting because every top 16 car got an award. So this car was able to get one that didn't get a top 16 award. And there were these guys from Italy, and actually, let me look up their name so I can shout them out here. They came from Italy. Now this was a Type 1 split window bus, a body dropped bus that was like pulled out of a swamp, basically. There was nothing left to it. And this bus went viral on the internet back a few years ago because they had designed, oh, come on, now my phone's not loading. I'm on my own Wi-Fi and my phone's not loading. Oh, here we go. So you guys may have seen this bus. So this is, oh, I'm going to butcher this. Albisano Motorsport, AMS. So it's AMS _ Albisano Motorsport on Instagram. Doesn't speak a lick of English, can't understand English, but a buddy of his that was there with him kind of acted as translator. This bus is the bus that has the brake setup on the outside of the wheels. And I remember seeing photos of this bus on the internet back a few years ago, and it was mind-blowing to try to figure out how on earth they figured this out. The rotor and calipers are mounted on the outside of the wheel. So they custom made the wheel, they custom made the axle and spindle so the brake line can travel through the middle of the axle as the wheel turns. Because there has to be a custom spindle and knuckle on the outside because the caliper has to stay stationary. The rotor is mounted backwards to the face of the wheel. And then all of that spins, has to turn. You got to be able to dismount it. So seeing that bus in person was a treat because I never thought I'd ever get a chance to see it in person. So that one got my like Ludwig's Garage Governor's Club best choice favorite car award. So that was really cool to see that in person, as well as the Night Ride van, the Pontiac Fiero. Another guy from Germany brought a Rolls Royce that was on air suspension. That was honestly one of my favorite cars there because I've always wanted to do a 1980s Rolls Royce. So it was really cool to see one done in the same kind of fashion that I would want to do one in. So after the end of the show, kind of skimming over a lot of this stuff because you guys got to go watch the episodes. I worked so tirelessly and so hard on getting these episodes out that I both enjoyed my time, but also filmed and then spent every night editing to get these episodes uploaded and out to you guys on the internet. But we got the Opel started, And the plan originally was to drive 3.5 hours from Wrocław to Berlin and stay with my friend Max. And I hadn't seen Max since 2018. I stayed in Berlin with him after Wörthersee back 5 years ago. And the plan was to stop and stay with him and then be 3.5 hours closer to Remco's. Because the plan from there was to make it to Remco's in the Netherlands the week of before Players Classic and fully modify the Opel Kadett. Suspension, wheels, tires, lots of other bits, and then drive it modified with Remco's Opel Kadett on to England for Players Classic. But after the dead battery, just hanging out, talking with people, sun was setting, and we had been up super late every night, and we'd been go the week before that as well. I decided it'd be best to just stay one more night at the hotel we'd been staying at in Wrocław. They had vacancy, so we booked one more night, and then just hit it first thing in the morning all the way to the Netherlands, which is, Google says, Google Maps says about 10 hours, but it took about 12. So rather than break the drive up, we're like, well, we'll do a good old American style road trip and just drive 12 hours straight in one day. So we got the Opel running, got back to the hotel, and it should be said that was the first time I drove the Opel ever. We had putted around Alex's shop with it, but never got out of second gear with it. I had no idea what this car drove like. I didn't know if it had any like dangerous wobbles at highway speeds. I didn't know if it even would shift into fourth gear. Knew nothing about it. Before we left for Poland, we put it on Alex's lift, and I did an oil change, oil filter, air filter, fuel filter, pulled one of the rear wheel bearings, repacked it and readjusted it, and just got to look underneath the car and just made sure everything looked good. No leaks, everything felt tight. Tires were good, wheel bearings felt good, brakes were good. Felt like that's all we needed. And Remco knows these cars real well, so he was like, listen, you'll have no problems. But no AC during a heat wave in Europe, and the head unit didn't work, so there was no radio either. So to fast forward back to Poland, we stayed one more night, Sunday night, and then Monday morning, hit the road straight for the Netherlands. And this Opel took every bit of abuse that it received on this drive. Because once we hit the German border and hit the Autobahn sections of the highways where there's no speed limit, my foot was to the floor the whole time. And I'd say in mile per hour, we were probably traveling between 100 and 110, maybe a few times at 115 miles an hour, flat out with the windows all the way down because no AC, with no radio. So for 12 hours straight, all day Monday, it was just, windows down at 100 miles an hour is super loud. It was a loud trip all the way to the Netherlands. So Kayla's an MVP for putting up with that and not sleeping at all, just being awake for the whole trip. Made it all the way through Germany and all the way into the Netherlands just around sunset. We arrived at like 8 or 9 p.m. This time of year, the sun's out till about 11 p.m. in Europe. It's crazy. But made it to Remco's without a single issue. Every time we stopped, I checked the oil, and it was bang on every time. It wasn't consuming oil. It wasn't burning it. It wasn't leaking it. That car carried us on its shoulders all the way to the Netherlands. And that was Monday. So Tuesday and Wednesday were our 2 days to both hang out with Remco, but also tear that car apart and get it ready for the drive on Thursday to England, because we had a ferry booked in Calais, France, across the English Channel into England on noon or at noon on Thursday. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. When you sit in a room for almost an hour and just talk to a camera with no one else around, you lose your train of thought. You lose where you're at. So we had a ferry booked for Thursday midday at noon from Calais, France. So we had Tuesday and Wednesday to tear this car apart and get it done, and nothing went to plan. Remco had a full extra set of custom coilovers that he had made for a Kadett GSI years ago. And turns out the GSI has different axles, different hubs, different size splines than the base model LS Kadett, which is what we had. So while I'm editing the Ultrace episode at Remco's shop, honestly, like all night and all day, I was editing to the point where I was falling asleep on my computer, literally falling asleep on my computer. So midday, like I had to get these uploads out, because the more that happened, the more I needed to film, the more I needed to document, and the further behind I would get. And so I was trying real hard to get all this stuff out. So Remco did the majority of the work himself in the shop. It turns out the coilovers wouldn't work on our Kadett because it wasn't a GSI. So he came up with a few fabrication ideas to alter hubs and alter wheel bearings to get the axles to work in the LS Kadett hubs. But then that plan was thwarted because we realized that the automatic transmission was a different size and it had shorter axles than the short and long axles that were in a manual gearbox, base model, and or GSI. So then we basically had to bin the whole idea of doing coilovers and put lowering springs in the car with shortened shocks, which Remco did have because he's an Opel Kadett guy and had so much Opel stuff laying everywhere. So we went with lowering springs, not ideal. The car wasn't as low as we wanted it, but it allowed for us to drive all the way to England over the horrendous Belgium and France roads at a safer ride height. For wheels and tires, we back up to Germany, where Alex comes into the picture, being a wheel distributor. Alex, with his company LX Felgen, the letters LX Felgen, full-blown sponsored this project at the drop of a hat. Remco gave us some wheel specs before we went to Poland while we were still at Alex's as to what would work on this car. 17s, if we decided to go 17s, we wanted to go with like a Euro look, like a narrow, tall wheel with a small tire. And the Kadett has a flat arch in the rear. It's not radius. It's like flat and it's got a real narrow wheel well. So if we went with big wheels, we had to go with a narrow wheel with a high offset. So within this small window of specs for 17s, it just so happens that Alex had a set of wheels in stock at his shop, which is not a warehouse. He doesn't stock a lot of wheels. He had a set of 17 by 7.5 ET like 34 or 38. And it just so happens he had one set of 185/35 17 tires, which we don't get here in America. So it was really cool to hang around a bunch of Euro sized tires because these are rubber band 17s, which we don't get here. So Alex was willing to give the wheels and tires to the project. So we mounted tires on these wheels, we balanced them, we boxed them up, and we shipped them to Remco before we even went to Poland to Alltrace. So by the time we got there with the Opel, they were already there. These were a replica split wheel. They weren't like a real wheel. Well, they're a real wheel because they exist. And they're TUV certified, which is basically Germany's stringent like automotive safety laws. So if a wheel's TUV approved, it's as legit as it comes. But it's a fake split wheel. You know, it's got bolts and it's not really a split wheel. And they kind of resemble a Porsche twist in a way, but they fit the car well. Color was great. The style was great. So although we didn't want to do a rep wheel, we had no time. And this was a surprise too. So we had no time ahead of the trip to plan out like doing some cool retro wheel or vintage wheel or something like that. So we did wheels, tires, lowering springs. Kayla worked pretty tirelessly on this project too, where she was separating the headlights to do a real vintage kind of Joey Mod, like smoked headlight look. So she was working the oven, putting the headlights in the oven and cutting silicone and glue and trying to separate the lenses from the headlight bodies. Remco had acquired a new old stock, still in the box, Hella heck blend for the Opel Kadett, which I didn't even know they made a heck blend for the Kadett. Real wild thing. So he had all these crazy rare parts ready to go on this car. So Tuesday and Wednesday, we just grinded out. Hardly any time to hang out. Tuesday night, we did a Ludwig's Garage pop-up meet at Remco's shop, which again was just astoundingly amazing. Marcel, again, shout out to Marcel and my Cologne friends. They drove, I think it was Remco lives about an hour and a half from Marcel. So Marcel drove his R129 Mercedes, which is on air, about an hour and a half there. But Eugen and 3 of his other friends drove about 3 hours up. And then Michael from Armanos in Bruges, Belgium, him and his wife drove 3 hours in an E23. Amando drove a Volkswagen Beetle, like a late 60s Beetle, 2 full hours to Remco's meet. We had a great time Tuesday night. Went much later as we expected, obviously, and that made Wednesday morning that much harder to get to work. But we got it done. We got it done in time. We hit the road early Thursday morning. We made it on time to the ferry, which Remco had booked the wrong ferry. He booked a ferry out of Dunkirk, France, which was an hour back the opposite direction. We had driven through Dunkirk on our way to Calais. made it just in time for the noon ferry, which we weren't booked on. We were booked on the noon ferry out of Dunkirk. And thankfully, there was room on the ferry. The woman was understanding and got us on the 12 o'clock Calais to Dover. And then we made the drive all the way to my friend Chris Purrs in Worthing, England, which is just about 30 minutes from Chichester, England, where Goodwood is, where Players Classic is held. So we made the drive, no problems with either car. Great experience driving through those roads in those old cars. And you'll have to watch the YouTube episode of the modifications to the Opel and the drive to England, because it's pretty funny. The rear wheels rubbed, even amongst or amidst our efforts to roll the rear fenders, which we did. We rolled the arches, we folded them in, we pulled them a little bit. Nothing rubbed, but once we put all of our luggage and a full tank of fuel in that car, the wheels themselves rubbed on either fender, and it did not stop the whole drive. About 7 hours from the Amsterdam area all the way to Worthing, England. The lips of the wheels rubbed on the car, and it was horrendous sounding. And oddly enough, didn't do a lot of damage. And I totally forgot to do a follow-up. A lot of the comments on the YouTube episode were like, we want to see the wheels. We want to see what happened to these wheels. But it surprisingly wasn't that bad. It must have been rubbing on a thick layer of like undercoating or seam sealer up in there. It sounded awful, but it didn't do much damage to the wheels, thankfully. But we made it to England, no problems. It was great to see Chris and his wife, Haley. We stayed with them last year for Roll Hard, and then they both came here and hung out with us earlier this spring. So then Players Classic, again, like what an amazing trip, what an amazing show, what an amazing venue. This was my 5th or possibly 6th Players Classic. This is the show I started traveling abroad for. So Jay, Carl, Ben, Rick, the whole crew at Players have become really good friends of mine. And that was a show that I just started traveling to once a year. And it was great to be there with a car, not really my car, but a car that I had a lot of effort and work into. And again, made my own award to present at Players. And yet again, wanted to present it privately, but the guys had me on stage as part of like an interview process. They interviewed my friend Kaisel, the Kaisa on Instagram, and James from Auto Finesse, and then me. So basically they did an hour block of 15-minute interview, podcast style, from the stage on the Saturday. So as we're up there hanging out, Rick was asking me if I had a favorite car, if I had seen a favorite car at the show yet. This was midday Saturday. And again, it's a 2-day show. And so I kind of took that opportunity to say, well, actually, much like Ultrace, I made an award that I wanted to kind of present privately to my favorite car here, which I haven't decided on yet. So Jay McTolbridge, the ringleader of this whole circus, said, I want you to present it while we do the award ceremony. So here I am on stage yet again, talking about who I am and why I'm there, which is amazing. It really is. It's nothing that I really wanted. I didn't really try to weasel my way in to get on stage and talk or anything like that. But it was a great opportunity. It was great promotion for this whole circus, my whole circus, the YouTube channel, the shop, the podcast. All of these doors opening and all these opportunities I had on this trip are basically why I'm sitting here recording this episode now. Taking time out of a beautiful afternoon that I could be down in the shop working, which I'm going to do tonight because I'm prepping the Porsche for an upcoming trip, which we'll talk about before this episode's over. But it all worked out. It was great. So I later in the day, I had an idea of my favorite car, which again was so hard. At Ultrace, it was so hard to choose one car to give this award to. And again, at Players Classic, it was equally as hard. But I met a guy named Tim, and he built a Porsche 912 that he had pulled out of a swamp in Alabama, which is near where I live now. It had sat halfway up the body in a swamp for decades and basically just rotted away. And they somehow got this thing in a container and shipped it to England, where he fully restored it mechanically inside and underneath, all while leaving the body just the way they found it in Alabama with the original Alabama plate on it, which is really cool because that aged and weathered just as bad as the car did. So this car, they put a 3.2 out of a 930, 911 in it. They did full undercarriage, Willwood brakes, SSR wheels, track tires, full interior, carpets, window seals, dashboard, seats, just everything in this car. So that was my choice. That was the car I presented the award to. I think it was a great choice amongst all the other hard decisions to make with different cars there. It's funny because everyone thinks I'm the patina guy. I do like paint. I've got cars with paint, but it just so happens I think I like patina more. So the Italian Type 1 bus, split window bus with the brakes on the external brake system at Alltrace, and then Tim's 912 fully resto mod patina 912 took it at Players. Then after Players, we had 2 days of rest and relaxation. We saw some castles, got some coffee, just kind of hung out with Chris and Haley on the south coast of England, and ended the trip, without rushing around too hard. Definitely editing though. Definitely spent the last 2 days editing, but that's relaxing too. You sit down, enjoy some company, sip on coffee. I do like it. I mean, it's a lot of work, but I do like being out of my normal element and being in a coffee shop or at a friend's house editing. Even though I kind of have to be focusing on the computer, I like editing in new environments. It's like doing your work on the road with just new atmospheres and new surroundings. So long story short, or long story long, that's the nutshell of the trip. And what an insane trip it was. I mean, I had no plans on driving clear across Europe when we flew over there, and it was an experience, an absolute experience. And I'm so thankful that Opel was as reliable as Remco said they were, and we had no issues, especially for how hot it was. There were plenty of sections through Germany where we were driving where there was nothing out in the countryside, no cell service. So it's just an incredible trip. The car is now back in the Netherlands. A lot of you guys have asked. I need to actually make a good Instagram post about this. But one of Remco's friends drove it back to the Netherlands. Since Remco financially invested in this car, that's his car, probably won't ship it here to the States, even though that's something that he kind of wants to do. We'll figure out if maybe that's something that, he really wants to do himself, and maybe it comes here and we figure something out. But there's a few burners simmering on maybe shipping something else over. We're not going to get into that right now, but had a few conversations while in Europe about possibly acquiring one of a few different cars that have struck my fancy for a few years now. Some of you guys may be able to guess it, but not sure if that's going to come to fruition. I got to sell the 924S first after a few more episodes of some things I want to do with that car. So to end, I want to thank, so many people. Like, we visited my friend Andy Fuelburn from XS in Dresden. We visited Bremy, Kevin, and Clemens at Felgentil in Dresden, all of whom filled our suitcases with merch and shirts and shoes and stickers and hats and jackets, and just Andy, so XS, Felgentil, the Holy Hall guys gave us so much merch. Adrian at Alltrace, there was a line 100 yards long that never got smaller all weekend long at the Alltrace store. It was like this walk-in store. They only let people in small groups so you could kind of browse, and it wasn't like a massive thing. So they just let people in, trickle in throughout the weekend. And he let us in before anyone else. Basically pulled the rope, had us walk in and choose anything we wanted. I mean, and it felt like the VIP treatment. So massive thank you to Adrian, Andy, Bremy and all the guys at Felgentil, Johannes and all the guys at Holy Hall, Remco at Non-Standard in the Netherlands, Alex with Alex Felgen, Chris and Haley for putting us up in England, Jay, Carl, Ben, Rick, all the guys at Players. I know I'm missing a few other guys at Players, but again, the Players guys filled us up with a whole bunch of merch. Really too sweet, really too kind. Definitely not deserving of that kind of treatment. So to be that far away from home, to be on different country soils, or different soils on different countries, to get that kind of treatment and just be surrounded by so many good people and friends is just such a blessing. I mean, I can't put it into words what that feeling is like, to just visit friends so far away from home and to be accommodated like that. So just huge thank you to all those guys. And thank you to you, all of you guys, if you came out to any of the pop-up meets, if you met up with us at any of the shows and bought any of the merch I brought with me, if you bought a Euro Tour 2023 keyring, cannot thank you guys enough for all that support. So that plugs the idea of doing an Opel Kadett Euro Tour 2023 shirt. I'm kind of in the design stage right now. I really want to do a Governor's Club Ludwig's Garage collaboration shirt with the Opel on the back, with some funny slogan from the trip. I don't know, no AC, no problem, or I don't know what yet. But I've already talked to my friend Josh from Like Hell, who is mostly doing exclusive work for Adam LZ. But he's put me in touch with a good friend of his who does amazing vector work. So we might work with him on a design. So stay tuned. Keep your eyes peeled for an Opel Ludwig's Garage Governor's Club shirt drop here pretty soon. And upcoming trips. Complex Union, Eurokracy, maybe Finland, which would be amazing. Tomorrow, I am buried in the shop doing motor mounts and a few other things on the Porsche 924S because on Wednesday or possibly Thursday, Elliot from 944 Barn and I are taking two 924S's. We're taking mine on air suspension and his on coilovers out to the tail of the Dragon, which I've never driven before. And if you don't know, it's one of the windy most roads in America. Heavily driven, heavily documented, heavily photographed, but I've never been there before. It's about an hour and a half from Elliott's in Georgia, which is about 4 hours from here maybe. So I'm going to be making a break of dawn trip out to Elliott's, and then together we will drive two 924S's out to the tail of the Dragon. And I'm super excited to document like a compare contrast performance episode of how the 924S on air suspension designed to handle like it's on coils, using dual bellow bags all around. I know I haven't really done a podcast episode about that car. I've heavily documented it on the YouTube channel. So if you're interested to know about that car, please go watch the series of episodes on that. But basically dual bellow bags, front and rear, with front and rear sway bars. The car handles amazingly. So we're going to take turns driving each car. We're going to kind of brainstorm like what is the best handling for what type of driving. Basically like GT driving. We're going to be, cruising out to the road that we'll be spiritedly driving and then handling on and whatnot. So it'll be kind of cool to kind of take turns driving each car to and from basically a racetrack type road. So that is next. That's in the next couple of days. So keep an eye out on Instagram and the YouTube channel for that trip, which would be really cool. That's it, guys. Thank you so much for all the support. I mean, I've done an hour almost on the dot. That's insane. I think that's the longest solo episode I've done. I am so sick of talking, which is surprising, I'm sure, to many of you guys who know me well enough. I'm sure it's surprising that I am sick of talking, but when you are sitting here alone, holy cow, is it hard. I'm so thankful for you guys that you guys really enjoy listening to these episodes, because otherwise I would not be sitting here alone doing this, talking out into the ether, hoping that later on you guys will enjoy this while on your drive to work or while working or just hanging out. So many, many thanks to you for all of your support. Cannot thank everyone on the Patreon more. I mean, seriously, that support is massive. You get all the behind the scenes content before it goes out, like early access content. And I'm going to do my best to try to put out monthly podcast shorts for just the Patreon. So I've left the link to the Patreon in the video's description, as well as the podcast episode's description as well. It's just patreon.com/John Ludwig. The YouTube channel, youtube.com/John Ludwig, and bagriders.com. Another Bag Riders plug. Remember to use the code Ludwicks, LUDWICKS, at checkout to get a discount on everything that Bag Riders offers. Everything that we used on the Porsche as well. That's it, guys. Over and out. Going to try to do more of these. Going to try to get back on a weekly schedule, but for now, I'm going to try to hit once a month because I know how hard it is to do one a week. We're over and out, guys. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you on the YouTube channel or here again in the next podcast episode. Bye-bye.